Good afternoon and welcome to the Hawaii State Senate. This is our Wednesday, November 22nd, 1:30 p.m. joint legislative informational briefing between the Hawaii State Senate committees on Commerce and Consumer Protection and Agriculture and Environment. We're in the Capitol Room 229. Let me see. We are live on Zoom. We are live on Zoom, but also on YouTube through the Hawaii State Senate YouTube page. We have a number of presenters that will be briefing the committee, and then we will have a question and answer. I'd like to thank my fellow chair, Gabbard, and his Agriculture Committee for joining us for this very pressing issue. I'd like to thank the different entities who will be joining us to present and provide information to the public today. We also have, I'd like to recognize several members from the House of Representatives. Our colleagues have elected to come and join us today for the briefing, given the nature of the situation. The purpose of the briefing is to provide information to the committees and the community as to the status of several significant invasive species outbreaks that are taking place statewide. I'd also like to note, as we enter into the holiday season, as you folks have noticed, this week there's a change in climate, but also the purpose of the briefing is for information to the public, especially consumers who might be going out during this holiday season and shopping, and especially purchasing plants or plant products, and to provide some information to them and to the rest of the public as to the best way forward and what's being done to address these different outbreaks. We'll briefly just introduce the members of the table, since there are some members from our counterpart chamber. And then Senator Lee would like to open with a few remarks because he is time constrained in participating in the briefing. So I'm Jarrett Kehokalole. I'm the chair of the Commerce and Consumer Protection Committee. We'll go this way and then.
Okay, Carol Fukunaga, Vice Chair.
Mike Gabbard, Chair of the Agriculture Environment Committee.
Scott
Go ahead, please.
Scott Matayoshi, Chair of Labor.
Chris Lee, Chair of the Senate Transportation, Culture and Arts Committee.
Lisa Martin, visiting from the House of Representatives.
Senator Lee, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you to the chairs for your indulgence, and thank you for convening this informational briefing. I just wanted to apologize for having to run to a conflicting meeting, but I did want to just emphasize how important this is for our state to have this conversation, particularly on the windward side of Oahu, where I think we've had a number of different species, invasive species outbreaks that are ongoing. I did want to also thank actually the chair of the Waimanalo Neighborhood Board, who's here with us this afternoon. I wanted to just play a quick recording which was taken by him last night in Waimanalo at about 8 p.m. that might underscore, I think, the severity of the problem that we're dealing with, which might come as a surprise to a number of folks out there. So with that, this is back of Waimanalo at 8:30 p.m. last night. And if you can hear that, that's the sound of what is typical on the Big Island right now, with a plethora of koki, which unfortunately are now all over the place. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to really try and take the situation seriously and figure out how we can work together to end, I think, the spread of invasive species, koki among them. With that, thank you, Chair, for your indulgence this afternoon. I look forward to working with everybody to try and address this, particularly because we have such a limited window of time to do so before it grows beyond our control.
Thank you. So we'd like to call up first the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species to present.
Aloha, mahalo for this opportunity. I'm Christy Martin with the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species. We're part of the University of Hawaii. We try to connect the university with the agencies that need some of that technical assistance. We also function in a unique position with respect to invasive species, and that we're not an agency, we're not regulatory, and so why are we up here first? CGAPS was formed as a multi-agency and non-governmental organization group to focus on the gaps that allow invasive species to enter, to spread, and to affect all of us into the future. And so what I would like to share with you today is just a very small snapshot of what some of those gaps are. I'm going to start by showing you just in general, what is our structure for preventing and managing invasive species coming into the state? And then we're going to focus on a very particular section where I think that we could address some gaps. So if Jamie, you could bring up slides. Thank you. So in order to amuse you as we're talking, we have a slide that's basically the structure for invasive species prevention. And what you have on the left-hand side of the slide, don't click through yet, please, is the world's biota. There's all sorts of things out there, and that first gray bar are the laws, agreements, and the prevention that happens. So some of it's federal and some of it is state. It keeps a lot of the biota out though. When those fail, you go into the next section. And that is where you can have foreign and domestic arrivals. So things coming in from foreign, things coming in from the mainland US. And again, that bar, those are the port of entry inspections, right? You have some on the federal side, you have some on the state side. If those fail, you hit the next bar, and they enter into the state. Now, our options for that, before they get to be widespread, there are laws and agreements. We can inspect conveyances to keep them from moving. We can treat conveyances, whether they be moving inter-island or right where they are for sale to the public. And you can reduce the risk of establishment, or you can stop the establishment of that pest. If you fail to do that, then things may become widespread, and we have very limited options for that, but we do have options. We can accept the costs in perpetuity, and we do that for some things. We can protect high value natural areas, which is what the theory of the national parks are, right? We're protecting those areas. And we can reduce impacts, perhaps through biocontrol or integrated pest management. Really, the area that we're going to focus on is the in-state. What can we do here as a state to reduce the arrival and spread of things coming in? Thanks, Jimmy. All right, so invasive species, they really are kind of a slow moving catastrophe, right? Unlike a tsunami, unlike earthquakes, unlike fire, once they enter, they can be slow to have impacts. And so people don't necessarily immediately take them as serious as some of those major threats, but yet they are. And in fact, they're more costly in perpetuity to each and every one of us than any of those other disasters. And this is a space that the insurance industry is looking at because it is one of the costliest things that we don't manage as far as our insurance or any other federal disaster response goes. FEMA doesn't work on invasives. Yet it's more costly to deal with an invasive than it is for a flood. The nursery industry and the live plant trade around the world is the most important pathway for the spread of these pests, bar none. You can spend a little bit of time on Google and look up the statistics. I won't bore you with the science, but they're documented. In the US, the greatest risk to forests of the US is the live plant trade nurseries. In the state, it is the same. And if there's a couple of sensible things we can do to stop the spread and to keep consumers from having to pay those costs of invasive species like little fire ants in our yards, coconut rhinoceros beetle killing our coconut trees, coqui frogs keeping us up at night. If there's two things we can do, it's this. If there's a high impact pest that has entered your shores, it's available at a nursery, it's infesting a plant, which is how they get in, you should be able to stop the movement. You should be able to quarantine it, right? You don't want to like let it spread from there. The second thing is you should control it to prevent that pest from spreading, right? You should apply the chemicals or the dips or the hot water or whatever it is that you have in your arsenal to be able to stop it from being bought by somebody and spread across that island. So those are the two most sensible things. Now, every other state in the nation has those abilities. They have those authorities to do it, except Hawaii. This legislature has provided the Department of Agriculture, the Hawaii Department of Agriculture, with the authorities to be able to do a wide range of things. He gave them a whole bunch of cars, but for this particular car, to access those authorities, they don't have the key. They have never passed the administrative rules to access those authorities and drive that car. The only chapter in the Hawaii administrative rules that's available for the department to do this is Chapter 72. A previous administrator with the department had come to us from Oregon, and just an amazing history of work on invasive species in this space. And he came to us, and Dr. Rogg looked at this authority, and he couldn't believe that Hawaii didn't have that rule to access to be able to quarantine and treat something that's available in a nursery to stop the spread of that pest. He was floored. But when he finally actually reviewed the rule, he said, we have to change this. And he initiated a rule change. That rule change went to the Committee on Plants and Animals with the Department of Ag. And with great support, that committee recommended it for the Board of Agriculture to approve it to go to rulemaking. The board also, under Chair Hurd, heard that and agreed. There was no testimony in opposition, there was only supportive testimony. So with the board approval to go to public rulemaking, that rule went to Small Business Regulatory Review Board, which is concerned about impacts to small business, right? This could potentially do that. There were questions, but in the end, there was just nothing but 100% support for the need for this rule. That rulemaking process was stopped. We've just heard recently, as recently as last week, that the department has decided to continue with that rulemaking process, which is the right thing to do. The rule needs to be heard in public meetings where the public can chime in on whether it's going to be beneficial, whether it's going to impact them, what their thoughts are. That's democracy, right? That's where we should do it. And so we're very happy that the department has reversed that effort, but I wanted to come before you today to say that little fire ants continue to spread. There's a long list of species that I don't know if it would have, helped significantly, but if we look at coqui frogs, when they first got to Hawai'i Island, they first showed up in a nursery. The department said we can't quarantine it. We didn't have any tools to be able to treat it, but we could have tried some things. We certainly didn't have the authority or the rules to quarantine it. Flash forward, nettle caterpillar, same thing. Shows up in a nursery, Hawai'i Island. Department can't stop the movement of those plants that are infested. They get spread across the state. On Oahu, we responded at a nursery. We were able to handpick those buggers off the plants. That was a very fun day. Flash forward, little fire ants, same thing. And so I want to point out these issues because when we look to what's going on with coconut rhinoceros, it has been spread to different islands. Each of those islands, Hawaii has no authority to prevent the spread of the mulch. If somebody wants to take that mulch pile that they're in, or any plants that they happen to be infesting, and sell that, they can, because it's not against the law to do it. So we don't have the tools in the toolbox to be able to do this sensible thing with regulations. And instead, all of those costs of all of those pests get passed on to us, the consumer, the resident. And we're going to be paying, those residents on Hawaii Island are paying to manage little fire ants, to try to get used to coqui frogs, to reduce the impact of those pests on their daily lives. And some costs are incalculable. They can't use their yards. The ants come in and they attack people in their beds at night. And if there's one thing I would hope that this committee and friends could do, it would be to put in place the systems and the response capacity that's necessary for not just addressing these, but being able to hopefully have a chance with the next thing that comes in. Because there will be things, you know? Absolutely. Is there something today? I don't know. But my hope is that we can have the rules in place to address those critical control points. And the last thing I have to say is that, you know, the department does good work. They are not the enemy. They're not the villains. They are overtaxed, overstressed. Their budget and their staff has shrunken year after year. And so if they feel like they can't take on or have that rule, let's find a way so that they say that we can and we will. The department hopefully will be able to someday work in nurseries, to be able to reduce the pests in those nurseries, whether it be through a systems approach, a compliance, whatever it is, they need to work there. Because we in the invasive species committee, the invasive species committees on each island, the Hawaii Ant Lab, the coconut rhinoceros beetle team that's run through the university to support this work. They work in the public. They work on the private lands to manage these things. It's a whole continuum. If the department can do work where the regulations are most needed, and if we support the response that can happen for private landowners, we can win. We just need your help to do it. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have the, I think we'll take questions at the end. Next up, we'll have the Office of Consumer Protection. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair. It's nice to see you again. And happy early Thanksgiving to all the committee members. My name is Mana Moriarty. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Consumer Protection. We are a division in the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. We're a small division. We like to think we have an outsized impact on making sure that business is conducted honestly, transparently, and above board in Hawaii. I prepared some written remarks. I hope you'll read them, and I hope you'll forgive me if I go off script. And
That's fine. Your letter was submitted to the committee and it was distributed to the members in the briefing materials. It's also available online on the informational briefing status sheet on the Capitol website.
I appreciate that, Chair. Hard work went into that. But I wanted to sort of get right to the heart of it. And the Office of Consumer Protection appreciates the passionate work that's gone into looking at this issue from a lot of different perspectives, from the private sector and public sector. We are coming to these issues as sort of an outsider. There is no precedent that I'm aware of for our office to get involved in any sort of enforcement action regarding the spread of invasive species through the consumer, through commerce. And part of that is tied to our legislative granted authority. We are charged with enforcement of 30 plus state laws, specific state laws, which do not give us the authority to regulate invasive species with they do not give us that express grant. I've heard Ms. Martin mention in her testimony that there is legislation out there that gives that grant of authority, and the legislation is not really the issue here. From OCP's perspective, we are just learning these issues. We do not have public complaints. We have not received public complaints about in our office about the nursery trade and the potential spread of invasive species through that trade. And as a result, we do not have open investigations. What we can say in terms is perhaps we'll leave the science to the scientists and those that know. OCP is comprised of lawyers and investigators. We do not know the best practices, admittedly, for treating or dealing with the spread of invasive species. What we can offer perhaps is some practical advice for doing business. And we think that the best businesses are transparent with their customers. And if they can provide information to their customers about invasive species, the threat that they pose, the consumers will be better informed, and we will be able to move toward a business climate where the consumer and the business can be operating on a level of trust. The alternative is a little bit of a scary proposition, that there is no disclosure, there is no warning from the business to the consumers about the threat of the invasive species that could make its next home in your backyard. And in that situation, we see the potential for a race to the bottom, where businesses wanting to outsell the business down the road are withholding information about the threat of invasive species. I think we can offer too that this is not just good for consumers. This type of business practice is good for the businesses and is in their interest. Tort law claims, if they are not being discussed now against business owners perhaps responsible for transporting invasive species into the homes and neighborhoods, they will for sure be being discussed after this hearing. People will be checking lawyers will be checking on the commercial general liability insurance policies that the businesses carry and seeing if there is recovery available from those businesses for infestations. A business can protect itself against potential liability by being honest with its customers, by being straightforward, and where they cannot guarantee that their products are pest-free, disclosing that information and trying to adopt best practices to mitigate against the spread of invasive species. If they make those disclosures, they will not only have helped to create a better business environment, they will also have potentially helped to avoid liability to themselves for a problem that many businesses may consider has already gotten out of their control. I think, Chair, your remarks are well taken, that the nursery trade is important, particularly this time of year, that people always want to go out and get their anthurium for Christmas. So if I was to give any advice to a consumer, I would tell the consumer to ask the nursery questions about invasive species and ask what that business is doing to assure that my plant is not infected. I'm happy to leave it there and available to take questions.
Thank you very much. So finally, we'll have the Department of Agriculture. Chair,
Hey,
Deputy Aloha.
good afternoon, Chair Keoho Kalole, Vice Chair Fukunaga, Chair Gabbard, guests, representatives, and committee members. My name is Sharon Hurd, Chairperson of the Department of Agriculture, and thank you for convening us today to talk about this very important issue. Actually, I'm going to take this opportunity to do a hot off the presses news release. We are issuing a news release today, and Deputy has some copies. Because of this issue we just confirmed that it's confirmed, right, Dexter? Correct. CRB detection on Maui, on a Kihei golf course. Sorry about that. Apparently, it was in the golf course in Kihei. It was on one tree, but I'll let the news release speak for itself. I will also thank the DCCA and CGAPS for their previous testimony. The Department of Agriculture considers the rulemaking process as a priority. That is our authority under 141-2. We have the authority to make rule changes to make Hawaii a better place, safer place for agriculture. Okay, so that's what happened. In February, we signed off on a procedure to move forward to public comment, and could have gone faster. We all agree, could have gone faster. It was a priority, but I'm going to say the primary reason it didn't move forward was for a lack of staffing. But you know, being in the middle of ledge session and having the other types of detections come up, it could have gone faster. So the rulemaking process was something that we wanted to take advantage of to meet this, to get to the point where CGAPS was intending to go, is to quarantine. Our intent at the department was not to delay the rulemaking process, but was to insert additional rules, which is our authority. We make changes through the rulemaking process. What we wanted to insert was a process from detection to quarantine that was transparent and available to everybody so that they could see, okay, Department of Ag was invited onto the property. They detected it. We identified an infestation. What do I have to do to avoid quarantine? And this is what you do. We treat, we come back, we see how you're doing. We come back, try an alternative treatment, come back, see how it's doing, which is in fact what happened with the nursery in Waimanalo. Detection, I think it was 7 treatments. I have the inspectors here, but 7 treatments later, back and forth, checking, detecting, counting. I think the estimation that I got yesterday was 2% of the property still has detections, but the other 98% they can sell from. The plants in that section have been deemed to be free. So that's the process that we were trying to insert into the rule. I realized that was a mistake on our part. We should have gone forward with the rulemaking process. And then after the public comment period, as was said, democracy is what Christy said, then we could have made the changes that were needed. Knowing that, we moved forward with the rulemaking process, which, by the way, I've been told can take, it's an indeterminate amount of time to go from public comment, board approval to rulemaking. So in the unlikely event that it goes to a year, what we've done is we've put together an interim rule. The interim rule we can do fast. We can put the interim rule up and say, okay, we've detected a problem. We're going to stop movement. The process of stop movement is pretty complex legally, because what you do is, from what I understand, if somebody buys a plant and then they say, ooh, little fire ant, we cannot just say there's a process again. We can't say, okay, where did you buy it from? Okay, we're going to do a stop movement on that location. The reason for that is there's proof evident. I'm not an attorney, but there's proof that you have to come through that say, did you really buy this plant from that nursery? It's kind of like a drug deal. Sorry to make that comparison, but you cannot arrest somebody unless you see them doing it or lighting the fireworks, or there has to be some
Evidence. I think you're looking for evidence. Yeah.
Thank you. And then it's like, okay, so evidence, thank you. before we take that action. So it's an investigative process that we have to go through that has to be transparent because it has to be fair and equal to everyone. And that's the process we were hoping to insert. But I get it. We're moving forward with the process as it was proposed, and we can insert that later. Regarding pathways, it really is there's so many pathways. I would say that every farm, every ranch, everywhere we have an invasive species. I wouldn't say it's an infestation everywhere, but certainly we have every farm, every ranch has some pests that they're fighting. But not only that, the pathways are, if I had a magic wand, committees, I would say we can solve this problem with staffing. Just give us a resource, give us the people, we can be everywhere all at once. But that's a big ask. It's a lot, especially with you talk about the Christmas season. How many Amazon packages do you get every day? This is a difficult challenge, but the magic wand solution is people and money, right? Then we can go out and be everywhere and check all those packages. Kind of hard when the packages have a time-sensitive due date. You're going to get it tomorrow by noon, and then we have to say, wait a minute, we've got to check it. So there's solutions, and we have the fixes. We just need, your help, money and staff. Regarding pathways, though, the very respected entomologists and scientists, Arnold Hara and Cass, who is part of the Hawaii Ant Lab, they've determined that LFA, little fire ant, has many pathways. Yeah, plant material is certainly, they're identifying trees and shrubs, flowers, edges of building, concrete slabs, cracks in the concrete, electrical outlets, wood products. So anecdotally, I understand that the cars and construction material and pallets also carry little fire ants. So to say that if we focus on nurseries and, detection, quarantine, we solve the problem, we know that's not true. We have to be more aware of the other pathways that these insects move around. They're crafty, they're mobile. And we know that they've been detected on cars. And we found this when we were doing the ROD inspections, rapid Ohia death. Inspecting the vehicles, we found nests of little fire ants within the cars. So it's difficult to say if you just, I'm saying nurseries are a good place to start. But if you start at nurseries, then we need to expand to lumber, construction material, cars, because that's the pathway, that's the way they move. Give us the authority to inspect more, and then and more people, of course, then we can be more effective. Our inspectors do a great job checking for movement within the nursery industry. They check every plant at every port. When people are moving plants, they do the peanut butter test. They do certified nursery checks twice a year, I think it was. Yep. So we go into the nurseries that have certifications allowing them to move product. We check them twice a year. And there's even a method to get what we call bad actors. We have identified about 5 bad actors in the state that know they have an infestation, but are not really doing anything about it. Deputy Kishida here is working on court orders to go into their facilities and take a legal action to say, hey, we need to get on your property. We need to see if you have an invasive. And then from there, there's the process to quarantine. So we know the bad actors, and we're working on it. So appreciate the time. We realize there was a delay, could have been faster, from the February approval. We are moving forward now. I think the rule change should be, not the rule change, but the authority to go to public hearing should be on the governor's office by Monday. Yep. And the interim rule take a little bit longer because of the ramifications of going into a stop movement, having to collect the evidence that's solid. But the interim rule should be up maybe by January. Well, we're predicting January, but regarding the rule changes, that's a wild card. may not be for a year. We're not gonna delay it or anything. It's just the process, right? So can't wait a year. LFA, CRB are moving, so we're putting in the interim rule.
Senator, would you like us to, we had a list of questions to go through. Should we hit some of them? Should we kind of go bullet by bullet and go through the rest?
Please, and then we'll open for questions at the conclusion. But I think also for the clarification of the members of the public who have not seen the briefing materials, if you could just, again, because Chair, you mentioned it already, but if you can briefly summarize the rules and what they're, why we should care about the rules, and then you can proceed. Thank you.
Got it. So the current Chapter 4-72 in the Hawaii Administrative Rules further details what is authorized in HRS and the Hawaii Revised Statutes for the department to be able to stop intrastate movement is kind of what it says in the revised statute. Chapter 72 specifically deals with intrastate movement of pests. And so there's three major areas, or what I sum up, three major areas in the rule change. The first is stop movement, giving us the ability to go to a business that we know is moving infested product and be able to keep it on site. The second major change is changing the decision maker from chief of the branch, the plant quarantine branch, to the state plant regulatory official. And the third major change is institutionalizing the coconut rhinoceros beetle rules on moving host material, CRB host material, sorry. And so those three things are the major changes to the 4-72. Did I hit the summary?
I think
Okay.
so. Please proceed. Thank you.
Okay, so the questions that the public should know about, important to let them know is, what is the risk? What are the risks to humans, animals, and the environment if LFA and CRB infestations occur even greater than they have right now? And we're familiar with the LFA risk to humans. It's that sting that is so painful. And then for the animals, dogs and cats specifically, it causes blindness. And to the environment, if you have a favorite spot in a park or favorite spot in the world, in Hawaii, I should say, and then little fire ants move in, you have to move, you have to vacate. So it changes the way you behave in the environment. So we cannot do that. We're trying to control those types of outbreaks. Not everything is a state property. So there's city and county we need to work with. There's other agencies that we need to work with to control that. As far as CRB is devastating to coconut trees, which is a symbol of Hawaii. To many, many communities, it's a staple of life. It's the water, it's the food. It represents their livelihood. So it's very, very, very impactful, more so to the different parts of the community. But we learned through this experience that CRB not only attacks coconut trees, it is very adaptive to the way it attacks agriculture. In Guam, they've discovered that the coconut rhinoceros beetle actually burrows down deep 6 feet. So we need to see what our coconut rhinoceros beetles are doing to adapt and get them where they are. Once they devastate the coconut trees, we have found them in fruit trees, papayas, ulu, bananas that have cultural significance to the people of Hawaii. So the CRB risk is big. Economic damage to the image of the state, if we don't have palm trees, that's immeasurable. So which agencies, the next question you had is, which agency is primarily responsible for responding to the spread of LFA, CRB, and other infestations? It's the Department of Agriculture, and we have that authority through rulemaking. We can't just go out and say, this is going to be the new thing. No, it's a process, and what we were trying to do is, as I said, insert a process within the rulemaking, how to go from detection to quarantine, how you can avoid that. What do you do? And I will pass the next one on to Dexter,
Sure,
which
I
is,
would like to also add though on that, Hawaii Invasive Species Council also has in 194-5, I believe, some authority that similarly mimics what HDOA would have to enter property. And if we're talking about interstate, then APHIS, USDA has some authority in controlling movement as well.
Thank you for that. The next question was, what are the likely sources of LFA and CRB, and how do they spread within the
I
community?
think we covered most of that earlier on LFA. For CRB, specifically green waste, and that is where majority of our education and control and best control methods is in our green waste system. How we handle it, not allowing folks to just throw it over the freeway, quite frankly, that's just very irresponsible, because that makes it exponentially more difficult to control. And so while we have some great they're actually private entities that handle green waste on Oahu, we are working with our neighbor islands to also have that kind of capacity to process safely green waste as well.
And thank you to the legislature for the $1 million for a green waste control program. We're sharing that with the other communities, Kauai in particular, and also the $500,000 for the compost reimbursement program, which will really help keep the compost clean. Okay, so what is being done to stop this? Oh, we did that. Oh, what is being done to stop the spread? We have our PQ and plant quarantine inspectors here. They monitor and spot LFAs at ports. The department inspects inner island. We have the certified nursery program I went on. And for CRB, the way we have handled CRB was, again, with an interim rule that prohibits the movement of CRB host material. We do outreach on green waste management.
Who's responsible for investigating reports of little fire ants and coconut rhinoceros beetle in consumer products offered for sale to the public? Hawaii Department of Ag Plant Industry is responsible and traditionally has held that responsibility, whether it's being notified directly or through 643 PEST is how we would normally get that notification.
The next question that the public might be interested in knowing is what are our procedures and efforts to investigate each of the complaints? What will change as a result of the administrative rule that is being proposed and will be heard probably at the January meeting? We covered that basically once there's a report, we need to get on property, and with the cooperation of the nursery or ranch or farm, we can enter and detect, confirm, and move towards eradication, suppression before we get to the quarantine.
I would like to mention in this section, the majority of our ag sector, really, they're not purposely moving anything infested. And they work with us immediately. And in fact, many times they're the ones reaching out to us for help. And so those actors or those folks in the industry, we definitely can get in there, guide them, help them.
Yep, and sorry.
No, please. And it's just the revisions to chapter 2 would help us with the small segment that don't.
For the public knowledge, we are by statute responsible to cover the cost of the treatment. So we need the funding to continue to buy the proper treatment. We don't, not that we don't want them to, because everybody, read the label, right, for the application, but our experts, we know what treatment is good where. If there's a runoff that could go into the ocean, we know that. So we are responsible to purchase the proper chemical to treat the invasive. We go back, if it's not working, we know what's step 2, and on, but that's on us. We have to provide the chemical. We don't expect the public to do that on your own.
And what procedures do we implement to prevent the further spread of LFA and or CRB once a likely source has been identified? We covered some of the minutia steps, but the big thing is maybe to hit on the folks that are less cooperative. The first step that we do is after multiple engagements of phone calls showing up, trying to gain entry, we do write a formal letter to them stating that within 6 days, if they don't respond, we will be moving to put an ad in statewide publication to then gain entry. If continued non-compliance, we then move, working with our Deputy Attorney General, to gain entry via court order. And then the current rules state that we treat. So it's not a stop movement rule, right? It's we'll go in there and treat to control and or eradicate.
I think you've done a pretty good job of covering much of the subject matter in the
Okay.
remaining questions. So if you can feel free to summarize whatever else in the questions you've been provided, or we can move
Thank
on
you.
if you'd like.
Thank you. The way I'd like to summarize is to say that invasive species is a priority for the department. We are moving forward with the rulemaking process because we heard from the public that this is where we should be going towards a stop movement. And, you know, when we hear from the public, it'll be the democratic process, and we'll take that with us into the rulemaking process moving forward. We want the public to know that the legislature has got their backs. You guys are on us constantly, and they should know that you have the watchful eye, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we move to questions, I'd like to recognize members who came in during the presentations. We have Senator Carl Rhodes from downtown Nuuanu area, Senator Angus McKelvey from Maui, West Maui, including South Maui and Kihei. And also joining us from the House, we have Representative Kahaloa from Kona as well. And with that, Chair, I think, are we ready for questions?
Yeah.
Members, any questions? Senator Rhodes.
For the Department of Agriculture. So you said you have an investigation going on with 5 bad actors right now. Can you tell us who they are? And if not, why not?
Your plans from.
I think we cannot tell you who they are, because if Department of the Deputy AG was here, he'd say, don't do it.
But
I think it's
Have
everybody
they actually
knows.
been? Has there been a court filing yet?
Not yet.
Not
We're
yet,
at the
no,
stage
but-
of a letter has been submitted to them.
One of the 5 bad actors has stepped it up, and we have done the 7 treatments. 2% of their property is still deemed to be infested. So not all the 5 are still,
Okay.
denying us access.
So I guess as soon as, because once it's in the court system, it's a public document, and you guys
That's
can
right.
do whatever you
Once we
want.
post in the publication, it'll be
Okay.
public.
All right, because I think there is some advantage in putting economic pressure on them. If people don't want to buy, if people aren't going to want to buy stuff, buy nursery stock from someone that has a known record of possibly giving you little red fire ants or whatever it is.
Whatever,
So
right.
I think there's some public pressure that can be brought as well. That's why.
Wasn't that the intent of the
Absolutely.
6 days later, we're going to put it in the public record? Yeah.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Senator McKelvey. Otherwise, the House is going to go. So
Oh, yeah,
please
I'm
go
gonna hurry up
ahead.
and do it now. Before you go off. Before you go, I guess, Chair, you probably the one to ask this question right here, because you kind of touched upon it right now with the different vectors that you brought up, other than plant material.
Correct.
With construction material, lumber material. I think you probably can see where I'm starting to go with this question right now, because when phase 3 begins in Lahaina and West Maui, you're going to have a flurry, a huge flurry of materials coming in across the board of all the types that you mentioned. And you've mentioned before staffing and manpower to do inspections, but there's going to be a breaking point, a give point, where stuff has to come in. Otherwise, costs inflate. Coverage now could be an issue. So what is your department doing to address this issue? And have you also looked at the emergency proclamation to implement the stop movement before admin rules are adopted for this area, should this arise during this period, either in Kihei, which is in the proclamation area, or in West Maui?
We have not looked at emergency proclamation, but we can. Emergency proclamation, what we're moving to now is the interim rule. The interim rule is a faster way to go, for us at least, because all it needs is my signature.
Fastest thing is to amend the proclamation.
Pardon?
It's immediate. Fastest thing is amend the proclamation. It would be immediate. If to try to get ahead of this potentially being an issue, as we move into these phases with all these materials moving in. And more.
Okay.
We can consult with the Attorney Generals. And my limited experience, usually the emergency proclamations, I thought release rules make things a little easier to get through versus create rule making, and that's why the interim rule making would be the vehicle. But we'll talk to the
Rules
AGs.
have been created through the proclamations already, I mean, in other areas. So, I mean, it's worth a conversation.
Yeah,
It is worth a
we'll take
conversation.
that back.
We'll take it back.
And then again, to the next question is, how do you look at ramping up, for huge increased inspection? If you're responsible for inspecting all of this
Right,
material
right.
coming in, right, from all over the place, where are you going to do it? Will you have the resources to do it, and what's the plan to do it?
We have been approached by several community groups. The one that catches our interest is Team Rubicon. It's a group of retired military citizens that they do it on a voluntary basis, that they can be deployed quickly, and they've done things, all over the U.S. But it's basically a mobile volunteer force that takes instruction, and they can help for a limited period of time. They also, though, we need to cover their travel costs, hotel costs. They don't expect to be paid, but the tools that they need, gloves, whatever, we can ask Team Rubicon to help us during that period.
The challenge, quite frankly, is the limited staff that we have. We're staffed not quite for this emergency. No.
No,
So they would be hands and feet.
Right.
But they
We would be there.
they don't have the regulatory authority to, quarantine anything, things like that. That's where our team would have to do that work. And
They can help detect.
And so it really comes to being able to increase our staff.
Is there an
to do
ask or a
this.
look at federal monies potentially? Because this is obviously in response to an unprecedented disaster situation. Has there been any discussion or in your department to identify, okay, we're going to need immediate resources, so this is.
The movement of invasive species, sadly, has not reached FEMA, or doesn't resonate with FEMA very much.
Not
At
yet.
least not in historical experience. But it is something we can explore further.
But for your area in West Maui, what we're concerned with now is the lack of grass because of the intense fire. The grass just incinerated, seeds too. So we are worried about providing alfalfa pellets, feed for the cattle industry. We're bringing them in from the mainland. It's quite expensive, but that's where we're going with FEMA money, because the climate change prediction is no rain for the foreseeable
Yeah,
future.
well, real quick segue, we lost the only processing plant, and so all the coffee crop is now rotting in Maui. This is pretty much the last crop of Maui coffee you're gonna see for a couple of years, period. So what is the department doing to work with the growers and to try and stand up some kind of ability to process to rescue the crop going forward?
We have investigated, we're looking at a bill with Senator Gabbard for seed, germplasm, clean.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a good chance to do CLR resistant coffee, which exists.
Mhm.
A chance to do a better variety, good cupping quality. But we have a bill in place to bring in germplasm, not only for coffee, but for all the other crops that might be affected.
No, that's really good, and I appreciate that too. But another quick, this is a little bit of a segue, but since I have you here in front of it, is the processing facility has been burned down, so they can't process coffee. So right now, as the ag chair department, the crop is rotting on the ground, I understand. So is there to look at potentially trying to assist the farmers in being able to replace that processing facility? See what I'm saying?
Absolutely. In fact, right now, we have a grant from the federal government that we applied for with the help of Ulupono. We were awarded $3.2 million for middle of the supply chain processing, which is what a processing is.
Yeah.
It's not on farm, it's not commercial point of sale, it's just middle of the supply chain.
Yeah.
So we have got to be fair and equal, right? You can't say we're going to earmark, carve off this much, but we're making it
This is an emergency. It's
we're
gone.
making it
It's
a
burned down.
competition. We're saying-
So I hopefully, chairs, I appreciate your indulgence. It is consumer protection slightly. But no, I'm sorry, but I disagree with you, Chair. Okay, up until August 8th, it existed. It's gone. Now you're talking about the whole crop being lost. So I think the reason why we have 127A, it's emergency. So hopefully your department can keep that in mind in looking at the need of replacing what was lost unexpectedly.
I feel the federal government, though, requires that we do a competitive process as part of the distribution. We will we have the control of the RFP. We can control that. So we can say with a preference towards the Maui devastation. We can do that, but we can't say for that one industry. It's federal money, fair and
Could we do
equal.
it through state funding?
I would say we can try.
Obviously, that puts the onus on us, and for me to be nice to my colleagues.
Senator, am I understanding correctly, though? You're talking about current inventory that is on the ground dying as we
Yes.
speak?
Yes, correct.
If we could connect after, and I totally misunderstood. I thought their inventory was destroyed, quite frankly.
Yeah,
I didn't realize there was still
a loss
industry.
across the board.
So-
But I highlight the rotting one.
If there are, we can possibly help them connect with other roasters or processors across the state as a solution. So please connect.
Yeah, we can do it. I may be too late now, but to highlight the loss and the department's help in identifying the replacement of this.
I can tell you that I have an email in my inbox right now from the Hawaii Coffee Association asking for green beans. They have a demand for green beans. So I'm sure, Kimo and his group have been reached, they've been touched by this request. So the industry is rallying, we're rallying, you're rallying. We'll get through this.
And real quick, last thing, Kihei, the infestation
yeah.
there. Are you foreseeing the need to do a stop movement for that, or is that an isolated thing?
CRB, we already have that, right?
Correct. There's an interim rule, but right now the site has been more than compliant. I think as it states, they're keeping product on site. It's been shipped, contained in a container for fumigation. So they've been more than compliant regarding this. So they've again been following the interim rule procedures, et cetera.
Thank you. Let's bring that to the community. Thank you, chairs. Appreciate you.
Wait, hold on, just in case you don't have to
Oh, yeah, okay.
You're popular.
keep getting up and down right church.
Exercise.
Are there any other?
Yeah.
Chair.
You had mentioned some of the funding that you've gotten for DOA, and I also wanted to we also did a $1.5 million to DLNR for the Ant Lab. So, and I really appreciate you apologizing about the mistake that you made in terms of holding things up, I suppose, moving forward. You'd mentioned that January, in terms of the interim rule, it's going to take a year after that to finalize. Is that right?
I think the better response is we don't know because it depends. So to get into the nitty-gritty details, it's 30 days from the time we post in a publication to the public hearing. And then depending on the volume of response, we need to then synthesize it and package it for a board meeting. Just depends how much that is. And quite frankly, it's going to land in the middle of legislative session. And so depending how long that will take for us will determine the next board meeting that we can get it to. If it's manageable, then within 2 months, we'll deck it for board meeting and get it heard, and it moves on. It just really, my biggest fear operationally is the volume. This is such an important issue, and people will voice their thoughts, and we need to respond and take every thought into account. So we want to make sure we do this authentically.
I'm assuming you'll be coming to us for this upcoming session in terms of additional staffing, and there'll be an ask there. Is that correct, Chair?
Yes, sir. In fact, the number one ask we have, and Maui being considered, we have to all be sensitive with that. We have 46 plant industry PQ, plant quarantine inspectors, currently being funded from a special account, which is the cargo fee. If we can take those 46 inspectors off of cargo fee, which is about a $2.5 million expense, we can have that much more money to buy treatment material, chemicals, hire Team Rubicon. The cargo fee is a very specific, narrow use, and that is to fight invasive species. And so we cannot gather money from other spots. I mean, this is the fund that we will rely on. And if we could take the 46 inspectors off, it would really invigorate us, give us a charge. But we were cognizant that right now they're funded. They have a funding source. They're not going to be, laid off or anything. So we're going to be sensitive to the needs of the state, but boy, that would help.
Members, any other? Okay, Representative Matayoshi.
Thank you for being here. I wanted to go into the interim rules a little bit, but right before that, I'm a little confused. You want to take what is a restrictive fund for 46 people and move that into to make them more generally funded, why not just ask for the money? I mean, it seems like if those 46 inspectors are qualified under that restrictive fund, they should stay under that restrictive fund, and you should ask for the same amount of money more generally to use, not only on that, but possibly other things too, to give you more flexibility.
That's an option. They were previously general funded. Then during the RIF, in order to protect their positions, we moved them into the cargo, because it was the stated use for the inspection, for process, for protecting the state from invasives. So we moved them into the cargo special fund for that purpose. But now the special fund seems to be, we need that money to fight the invasives that have just exploded on us. So
That's true. Well, I'll leave it up to the chair here to handle the budgetary
But I
things, but
understand.
it's a little odd to ask for general funds for a restricted thing when do you know where I'm going with this?
Oh, no, they're civil service employees.
Yeah, I
So,
understand.
yeah. So
Okay,
it's-
well, as long as the money is going to the right place, which is to stopping invasive species, I appreciate it. My question I'm just following up on Chair Gabbard's line of questioning about the interim rules. When, forgive me, because we've been around and around for months on this, kind of the four of us. I've been told a number of different things, and I want to know which one is true at this point.
Okay.
The interim rules that were proposed prior only had to do with coconut rhinoceros beetle. Are those the interim rules that you're talking about implementing fairly quickly, or are those already in place and these are for LFA?
So the rules that were passed by the board in February 2023, that included a stop movement. Again, generally, there's some other little things,
Interesting.
but the big thing, stop movements, this changed to SPRO and coconut rhinoceros beetle additional rules.
Okay.
And that's the rules that are in play right now.
So those are the interim rules.
I think he's.
No, I'm sorry, not interim
yeah.
rules. That's the rules that we're moving forward to public hearing.
Right.
The only interim rule that is active today is coconut rhinoceros beetle.
Okay, but you talked about implementing another
Another one
and what is
specifically to
that?
little fire ants
For stop movement.
to
Okay.
be able to do that, correct?
And is it stop movement and a treatment, or is it just stop movement?
We're working out those details on what that could look like, because this is a very different interim role than we're used to, quite frankly. Because usually it's the controlling the movement of something to control it. CRB, for example, restricting the movement of host material to restrict CRB, quite frankly. For this little fire ant interim rule, we're working out some of the details on what we can put together in this package to be most effective.
Are you running into legal issues? Is that why? Is it AG's office that's saying you can't do one and not the other?
No, I think it's just the AGs are definitely being helpful in telling us what paths are available to move forward on. Not necessarily that it's illegal or anything like that. It's just how we can put it together in an interim rule setting, in an interim rule package that will also be operationally doable. So all of those pieces together.
And I will add that you're right. We are also looking at how we can make this fly legally and avoid lawsuits which happened before when we tried to do a stop movement. So it's kind of like we want to do it right.
Okay, and I say this as a lawyer, but sometimes they're a little too conservative, so don't be afraid to push them a little bit. All right. How fast until these interim rules go into effect on little fire ants?
We think in January. We need to schedule, the way it goes is we need to schedule a plant and animal committee to pass these rules or recommend to chair to pass the rules, and chair will sign. Because of the holiday season and the necessary sunshine law requirements, we don't know if we can lock in a December quorum. If we can, great, it'll be a lot sooner, but we're saying comfortably in January.
Okay, the reason I say that is because the point was made that a lot of plants are sold for the holiday season. I would love for these interim rules to make a push to get them in place
Sooner.
before all the poinsettias and all of that gets spread all over the place, possibly with little fire ants. So if you folks could make an extra effort to do that sooner rather than later, I would appreciate it. I mean, honestly, this should have been done a long time ago. So we're kind of up on a deadline here. But the point that has been made here is that we're looking at a point where a lot of little fire ants could be spread all over the island. And we have a chance to stop it if you folks can push these interim rules and stop the bad actors. So the last thing I wanted to touch on is I kept being told during the course of our conversations over the last couple of months that if we just had authorization to go forward with a public hearing on the rules, not the interim rules, that it would be a matter of weeks before it could be implemented. And now I'm hearing up to 10 months. I'm hearing another month before even we can hold the hearing. I mean, this isn't consistent with what I was being told in prior meetings with you. So can you explain the discrepancy, please?
Bad information on my part.
Okay.
I thought that goes to public hearing, the public has their democratic moment, they put all their comments in, either way, we distill it, and we present it to the board. Board meets every month. I thought that that's the process. Legal counsel has advised me, our deputy AG says, there's a long time between collecting the comments and going to the board. What you have to do is address not address, but at least consider every piece of comment testimony that comes in and decide what are you going to do with that. Are you going to then change the rule that you present to the board? Or are you going to say, we're just going to present the rule as is to the board? And then at that point, you have a chance for more testimony. So it was me, I was ill-informed in my own head and the process. I thought we could. Once you get to public hearing, we distill the information, summarize, make a case, present it to the board like we do at other board meetings, request to whatever for the board to consider. It's a lot longer when it's a rule change. It's not like approving a lease.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, no. I thank you for the clarification. It is a little disheartening, I think, that it's going to take that long, because I'd been telling members of the public that it was going to be a matter of weeks if we could just get this hearing. So now that we know it's going to take so long, I really think that pushing the interim rules even faster, especially if we can get it done in December, is even more important, because of that long lead time. I mean, we really can't wait 10 months for little fire. I think we have a window of opportunity here to stop little fire ants and drive them out of Oahu. And if we can do that, I think my kids can play in playgrounds again. I mean, there's a lot at stake here for everyone and everyone's families. So I just want to emphasize that if we can stop the spread before kind of the Christmas spread, I think that's going to be really impactful. And I'd like to keep in contact with you folks on how that's going, so that we can hopefully get this done in December.
Representative, that's a very good, we have a public information officer that has a lot of outreach tools, and we can certainly put that out. We have a plant quarantine conference room. We can even have, people come in and come to a session, how to identify, we have, thanks to that, we can do outreach,
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, but please, would love your partnership in this.
Definitely, thank you.
I have a follow-up question before I open it back up to members. So I guess what you're saying is that the rules are at the 5-yard line. You guys need to do the public hearing before you punch it in for a touchdown. But the lawyers are telling you have to consider every single piece of public testimony that might be submitted. So the process might be delayed if there's some sort of testimony that makes you reconsider exactly how you've construed the rules. You got to take time to thoughtfully consider it. What if I'm one of these 5 bad actors and I make up every excuse in the book in this public hearing as to why you guys can't come onto my property and regulate me? I'm trying.
We have
I'm not really a bad actor.
Right.
What about all my poinsettias? Are you saying that that's part of what you might have to consider that could potentially slow down the process?
The court order process, I think, is going to kick in for the bad actors.
Well, but to specifically answer Chair's question, I think, because that is true, but I think, yes, we'll need to consider it because it still is testimony, but what our job is to be able to synthesize it for the board to not have to look through 200 pieces of testimony, right? So we can say that, yes, we did have 1 or 2 or 5 or whatever it is that are saying this is a horrible idea. We have 32 that are saying these adjustments are needed, and we have 50 that are saying pass as is. So we can do that. It's just, I'm more worried about the volume and being able to do that work to get it board ready.
So, and then one more. So is it fair to say that the rules would require you to take action against bad actors without having to do all this court rigmarole that you're undertaking right now?
I would say yes, we have the process for the
And
court
so
order.
there's a process
Right.
that needs to accompany these rules to make it clear to everyone in the industry that if you do not comply and work with the department voluntarily, that the department has the discretion to take this kind of drastic enforcement mandatory action.
Yes,
Okay. Is that process required to be put forward before the public hearing or after the public hearing in order to avoid your analysis paralysis before the rules are finally enacted?
While not required, it will help the process because we know already that is a huge concern from our industry, as stated. So that is very necessary to show the industry and the public that there is a process that the department will follow.
So how long
It's
is that
not
going to
just-
take?
the court order should be done.
Not the court
right in
order.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The process.
We're pretty close. What we've done with the one company or organization, nursery that's been quite compliant is helping us to formulate and quite frankly
The data,
try
yeah.
this process out, and it seems to be working great. And so we'll be more than ready by the time we publish the rules to have the supplemental departmental procedures ready for also public distribution.
Okay, thank you. Members? Senator McKelvey?
Rep. Matoshi kind of jogged my memory when he brought up his line of questioning of the plant inspection branch along the lines of increased demand because of these upcoming phases and such. And do you see that with the plant inspection branch? Do you see the need for more than the 46 inspectors that are currently funded now? And so are you looking at raising the fee to cover them? Has there been any thought about trying to bifurcate that area's inspection needs to somehow, like Hawaii did with their permitting, to funnel federal money in there? What? Just real
It's,
quick.
without question, we need more staff. We definitely do, but it's not necessarily only for the movement of plants and it's for I think the number is that the amount of packages coming into Hawaii has quadrupled and our staffing has not.
How much staff do you need? Like, what's your ballpark
A
figure?
magic number, probably quadrupling our staff. I mean, if we have quadrupled the amount of cargo that's coming into the state,
Which will happen. Yeah.
which will happen,
Yeah,
and
it's gonna happen.
and dedicate a certain portion to the movement from here to Maui and back, quadrupling. So right now we have about 100 staff in Blank Quarantine. We would have to quadruple that to 400.
So absent any kind of other funding, it would be from the container fees. So they would go up substantially. And you pyramid that with inflation and everything else, you'd be looking at.
Well, yes, and our civil service, July 1st, 23, our salaries went up 2%. July 1st, 24, salaries are going up again. So those 46 inspectors that are being covered by the cargo fee, which we'd have to go through a rulemaking process to increase that, I believe. It's the losing battle.
Could you bifurcate the extra demand of Maui? Like, I thought Kauai was innovative in that. The permitting that was in response to Aniki went to a separate office of permitting that Fed funds were used for. Is that some kind of a strategy that you guys would look at potentially?
I would say, yes, it's an option, but we'd have to vet it, right? We don't want to be breaking any rules.
Start vetting.
County is, you can do things fast. State, not so fast.
No, but I hear that, but this is about working ahead, because this is coming up. See what I'm saying? That's why this conversation happening now, and I appreciate the hearing happening.
And
It's
we-
important because now is the time to put in that plan. The wave is coming, so how now do you implement the need for more inspectors, which is coming? That's the finger snap. Thank you, Chairs, appreciate you.
Thank you. Senator Rhodes?
Thanks. I'm always reluctant to ask questions when I think I've missed something important, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. it sounds to me like you're saying with the rules, you actually have to specifically name the pest. Is that what the statute requires? You have to put the pest in the specific pest in the rule?
That's true, but the catch-all phrase of invasive pest covers the whole list. So when you say
Right,
we're
but so
going
then
to,
why do you, unless I'm
but it
misunderstanding?
has to be on the list. So
You can't
CRB's on,
just, it doesn't, I mean, that seems incredibly like the slowest possible way to do it. I
well,
mean,
it's a little bit objective, because what might be a pest to me, for instance, I hate lizards. It will never make the list because it's my subjective pest. So the list of invasive pests that make the
Why
list,
why couldn't we have a statute that just said an invasive species
As deemed by the.
as deemed by,
and that's,
the Department of
goes through the-
Agriculture?
it's kind of like
Plant
that.
and animal and correct.
It goes
correct.
through the
It's
Plant
not
and
a
Animal
revised
Board.
statute that creates the list. Is that, am I understanding correctly?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, by the time we've gone through all the process and designated little tiny red fire ants, you know, they've already spread through half the state. So why not have some kind of I know government is not even really supposed to be nimble. It's, you know, it's the opposing thumb of government and the nimble fingers of the private sector. But sometimes we do need to be quick. And if we have to wait until we've specifically designated each pest, I mean, of course, it's the easiest time to squish these things out is when there aren't very many of them.
No, your
So
point is well taken.
So but the question is, we have to designate, the
Yes.
pests have to be on the list.
And Wasmania is on the list. Little fire ant is on the list, along with apple snails, white flies, African snails. It's a long list.
Right, but there's going to be something new next time, right? I mean,
Then we have to add it to the list.
that doesn't strike me as, okay, thank you.
But then
Chair,
it's,
I think the answer to your question is we can absolutely change the law.
Okay, sounds good.
Representative Martin.
So what I'm hearing is that the original rule change that was approved by the Board of Agriculture and has already been vetted, now you feel like that's insufficient, so you want to add to that this process that would take place.
well, what we, go ahead, sorry.
And so I wanted to find out first how long that process takes and if there is a delay from detection to stopping movement, or if the stop movement happens immediately, or if there's a chance to try this treatment, try that treatment before stopping movement. And then my second question is, should we tell interested parties to not testify in order to help speed this process along?
That wasn't my intent at all,
wasn't it? No,
Representative.
Too late.
Apologies.
Yeah, so how long is that period, and does it in effect immediately freeze the movement of whatever invasive species is on the list at the moment?
The plan would be to stop the movement while treatment is happening. So it wouldn't make sense for us to just be treating and letting infested plants be walking out the door. Now, detection and confirmation that it is a pest that we need to tackle, there might be a slight delay while that confirmation happens. Not long. We have folks in state, on island, and experts that we can even go to verify. Especially if we are going to affect businesses, we do want to make sure that this is something we're going to take extreme actions on. At the same time, like I said, if there is very potential infestation, then we would have them hold the product. That's what our team currently does at the ports. That if there is an infestation of some kind, and let's say it's ants, but we haven't determined yet, then we hold the product until we can verify and then release.
Thank you. Chair, may I ask a follow-up? So I just wanted to, actually it's more of a comment than a question, but by not publicizing the name of infested nurseries, bad actors or not bad actors, but just ones with infestation, it really impacts everybody else. So for example, in my district in Waimanalo, we have a nursery that has, resisted compliance. Now, because people don't know which one, they don't want to buy at any of the nurseries. So you're not helping the industry by being secretive about it, is what I'm trying to say. It puts the rest of the industry in a very awkward place. And so I would really urge transparency, and hopefully everybody, if it's understood that they are working towards ridding themselves of an infestation, and this is just a normal process that everybody is collectively fighting invasives that come through no fault of their own to their business at one time or another, then hopefully it wouldn't have a big stigma and it wouldn't reduce, business for everybody.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? I just got to ask the Senate first. This is our floor and our hearings. But Rep. Matayoshi, please go ahead.
I, of course, defer to the Senate at their own hearing. And thank you for allowing us to be here too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have a couple of things. First, the interim rules, going back to that. Sorry to harp on this so much, but it is the fastest way we can get this under control. I know we talked in our prior meetings about a right of entry. Is a right of entry also included in the interim rules, even though a bad actor may be resisting?
That it is something that we're discussing, and how that works with the current rules that have a stated process to get to that right of entry, meaning court leading up to court order. If the interim rules would be able to speed that process up at all. So that is under discussion right now.
Okay, because obviously, stop movement and things like that won't be possible unless you can get on and actually verify that the
Absolutely.
area is infected. Okay, I'm glad you guys are on that. On the court hearings, I just want to change your paradigm a little bit on that. I mean, you folks are putting in so much time and resources to getting the court orders, and you're saying that you're short of resources elsewhere. If you were to pass these interim rules and it was to speed up the process and obviate the need for these court orders, I think that you could be saving a lot of resources on the back end too. So I really want to encourage you folks to, again, speed up these rules and the interim rules, because I think it would save you folks a lot of resources that you're going to be later coming to us to ask for. And I think that the legislature, both the House and the Senate, are going to want to know that you folks are doing everything you can to keep your costs down, which I think means implementing the interim rules as quick as possible to prevent the need for going to the court and running that whole process. So it's kind of good for everybody, I think. And lastly, if you have a lot of testimony that you need to summarize, maybe try ChatGPT. I was going to suggest an AI maybe to crunch this and summarize it. You may want to give it a shot. I mean,
Just scolded my children about using that. What?
Not to plagiarize your essays,
Let me
but
ask if
to
that's legal.
crunch
Let me
testimony.
ask if that's legal.
I think it's a summary tool. AI is kind of right there. I think we're there. So if you really are having a difficult time doing it before the next meeting, it may be worth a shot. And again, I'm just trying to speed up this process.
Thank you. The first thing that comes to mind when it's speeding up processes is, do we have to go to the union for that?
ChatGPT is not unionized yet.
Okay.
Chair Gabbard, did you have a question? No. Okay, so the question I had was around the number of inspectors that you need. You've traditionally been aware, I mean, the department has been aware for a long time that more resources were needed for more personnel to conduct things like inspections. And so my understanding from coming into this was that part of the adaptation that the department has made over the years to account for the lack of resources to adequately staff those programs is to encourage voluntary compliance with best management practices, or to work with the department when different pests present themselves, so that the department can coordinate resources that these individual small farmers may not have access to figure out solutions, right? But it does seem like the paradigm shift that's being talked about is the attachment of actual enforcement consequences to industry, to businesses that do not voluntarily comply. Because prior to this initiation of court action, which has taken place in
the last week, we've proceeded.
In the last week, prior to the initiation of court action in the last week, you can agree that there has been no meaningful consequence to bad actors in the nursery industry who are knowingly selling infested plant products to consumers.
Can't agree with that. I don't know. I'd have to check.
Okay, well, so on August 3rd, you wrote us a letter in response to an inquiry that I and several legislators made to your department about the nature of these infestations. Selfishly, it was on the windward side, but since then we've come to recognize, we should have also gone earlier. These are statewide concerns. You wrote that as of August 3rd, the department is unaware of reports that businesses are knowingly spreading little fire ant in their plants or other materials offered for sale. So at what point between then and now have you become aware of these 5 bad actors?
Should we call up Jonathan? Maybe he can give us a date. Do you mind if we call up Jonathan? Plant quarantine.
If there's a
chief?
date, or if you would like to recognize that this letter was misinformed,
Oh,
we could perhaps do it that way.
I think I responded to that. We are not aware of any from the public, right?
And I quote, the question was, is the Hawaii Department of Agriculture aware of reports that businesses are knowingly spreading little fire ant in their plants or other material being offered for sale? And your response, and I quote, is that the department is unaware of reports that businesses are knowingly spreading little fire ant in their plants or other materials offered for sale. In our experience, businesses have been very amenable and seek assistance from the department. We do not want to jeopardize this relationship with farmers and landowners, risking non-reporting of future flare-ups by publicizing the work we do with individual businesses. So it seems like the paradigm shift that we're talking about is attaching meaningful consequences to the 5 bad actors that you claim to have identified since you wrote this letter.
Okay. I don't know how to answer that except to say that at the time we responded, we were aware of the process, you might say, that we could go on with the court order. But I would say that I'm not sure at what point we would have moved forward. Do you know? No.
On November 3rd is when I was notified of the specific bad actors in the Waimanalo area.
So did you know before you told us you didn't know?
I must not have known.
Or did you
otherwise
only
it-
find out since August 3rd that there are nursery operators that are not complying voluntarily with your programs, that are selling products that are infested with pests to the public?
Well, it goes back to that evidence word, right? If we were to say that you bought this plant from this nursery, we would have to have evidence that you in fact did buy that plant and that plant did not get infested at some other location. So I'm sorry, I would say that at the time I answered that, that was the extent of my knowledge.
And so since then, you've elected to change posture and initiate enforcement action against these 5 identified bad actors.
Well, we were always working with the 5 bad actors. Some
So
of
you
them-
were aware of the 5 bad
Well-
actors?
Chair, Jonathan Hall.
Why don't you come up?
Jonathan Hall, acting manager for the Department of Agriculture Plant Quarantine Branch. So I'm not aware of the specific dates in which the department was made aware of the total of 5 bad actors. One of which is the one that we've been talking about with where the staff have been going routinely for the last maybe 3 weeks to do surveys and work with them to do treatments. And we're not finding LFA currently at that point, at this nursery. Doesn't mean that they don't have LFA. We're going to continue to work with them to ensure that a comprehensive survey is conducted to ensure that we're not finding things. The other 4 nurseries, my understanding is going through the process of getting entry to determine whether or not they actually are infested or not. When we get reports of violations, for example, knowingly selling commodities that are infested with goods, we need to ensure that those reports are credible, and part of that is determining, do we have the plants? Do we have a sample? Do we have a receipt? Just because someone says that there is a problem doesn't mean there actually is one. And we have an obligation to I guess the person who's being accused of violating, of ensuring that that is the case.
So if I may interject and ask a question. If what you're saying is that you're required to establish via some confirmed evidence that infested products are being offered for sale to the public, but you do not have the authority to stop the movement of those products, how are you ever going to establish that those products are moving?
And so that's where the 141.3.5, the entry to private property, right? So you're going to get the report. We want voluntary access. It's going to be denied. We're going to give them that notice, and if not, we're going to go through the process to compel access. And
How many times has that process been initiated in the last 3 years? 'Cause that's about how long we know minimum Little Fire Ant was at least on Oahu, right?
Not to my knowledge, in the last 3 years.
Okay. And so when the Office of Consumer Protection says they haven't received any complaints, it could potentially be because consumers have no idea there's a problem. And the Department of Agriculture, which is the only entity that has the legal authority to take action against these knowing violations of the law, has never actually initiated any action to enter property of recalcitrant businesses to establish whether they actually have the pests on plants that are offered for sale.
We have done that in the past, just not in the last 3 years.
So not since the outbreak happened.
We haven't done it in the last 3 years that we were aware of.
Okay. I just want to make sure that that's clear, because I do also appreciate, like Chair Gabbard mentioned, that you've since changed course and elected to go through with the rules which allow the stop movement, which according to the law, I believe is defined as quarantine, the quarantine of infested products. So that if you do elect to take action against these bad actors, however many there are, you can actually locate the evidence that you need to take further action, like naming these entities so that the public can protect themselves, right?
I think you said 6 days after, we will name them.
Okay. Any follow-ups before I come and change the subject? Representative Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a little bit about surveying. We've been very busy trying to get neighborhoods in the district surveyed, and it's really hard to get a hold of people, whether they're individual residences or maybe adjoining businesses, nurseries, what have you. Will there be any way to force entry for surveys without any, onerous legal action, but just literally to just go test? There's construction sites, there's absent owners, there's vacation rentals, there's different things, properties that are hard to access. And it's not necessarily because the owners are opposed to being surveyed, but they're hard to get a hold of. And so can there be any way to have a legal right to go and survey without
Do we
any?
know that there's little fire ants at the border of their property or things
Yeah,
like that?
these
There
are
might be-
areas of concern identified as possibly infested because of neighboring infestations.
I have to look into this a little bit further.
That sounds like, you probably have a better answer than me, but private property is very sacred in the United States and in Hawaii. So we'd have to really look at every possible way to not get into trouble, you might say. The state we're trying to protect the state from litigation. So it's a good thought. It's a good thought.
It's a big problem. I mean, if she's triggered my thing, I'm looking at a lot of vacant properties where owners are pretty much checked out. Took the insurance, and as soon as the proclamation ends, they're going to list the property. They're not going to respond to you. And so you're going to have a lot of properties where potentially the report's coming in, and yet nothing's being done because you're probably never going to get a hold of these people.
I'm going to bring up the coffee industry. There's a lot of feral coffee, feral wild plants, and those are infested. It's kind of like the same thing. How do you go out there and treat that? LFA, it's everywhere. How do you go out and treat that? Because the minute you secure your place, all the ferals, they have legs. They can come in and the pathways are there.
Maybe you should have a separate emergency proclamation just for these invasive species. Then you can come right on the property. Then you can treat the whole area. Then you can attack it as basically a disaster zone, right? I mean, I just throw it out there only because it seems to be a continuing thread of the imminency and gravity of the problem that continues to spread. What's that expression go? Life just never ceases. Every opportunity, it's always going to seek to expand, and it never rests. It never sleeps. There's no holidays, right? It's a continual cycle. And so I guess the big question then is, if this is an inevitability, what is being done, like in the case of Guam, to try to get ahead of perhaps the nihilistic view that this is inevitable? So how do we protect? How do we protect what we have from the creeping doom? This is not going to stop.
I think Deputy Dexter just had a phone call with Guam. We really haven't briefed each other on it yet, but do you have a response?
Not really in Guam's response, but I think for us, we saw the Mililani community really show up when they had a little fire ant infestation. We're seeing some sections in Kahalu, Waipole specifically, really showing up, and community organizations that are stepping up to help self-organize along with Hawaii Ant Lab and others. We are at the point that we do need the community to also rise up to help in this, to show up, like Representative Martin has stated, in doing surveys, et cetera, even if it's the PV stick, outside the property at this point. So I think Mililani and what's happening in Kahalu, Waipole are great examples of what can happen.
So self-vigilance is clearly important here too.
Absolutely. With the limited staff that we have, we don't want to pull them from the port to do a survey. I need them there to protect our ports and not let anything else through. So while we can do some of it, we do need the public and residents to also be vigilant.
So if I can follow up, there was some hesitance there about the declaration of an emergency to address, the focus, I think, is specifically on little fire ant for right now, but there's also coconut rhinoceros beetle. Obviously that would likely irritate constituents on Hawaii Island who have had to deal with little fire ant for the last 20 years. And the department's own determination that Hawaii Island is infested, and so attempts at controlling or even eradicating the little fire ant population on that island are not feasible, right?
We can try to suppress, Senator. Okay, but we're not giving up, but we're working on suppression, which you can move to eradicate.
The control and eradication of invasive species are legal terms that the department utilizes to allocate its resources. And you have deemed infestation also is, and you have deemed Hawaii Island infested with little fire ant. And that reflects a recognition on the department's part that eradicating or even specifically controlling the population of little fire ant is outside of what is a reasonable objective for the department.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. So up until last week, there has been no actual accountability for the bad actors in the commercial industry who are knowingly spreading. And so I think, again, to go back to the paradigm change, it seems like given the fact that your budget is so tight and there are so many other priorities and so many other needs, there's some sort of perverse incentive in the department to remain unaware of bad actors, until the point that the infestation that establishes itself. And then there's perhaps not the same amount of necessary accountability on the department's part to take action.
I'm uncomfortable with the way that was stated. We
Okay.
are doing our best with the resources and tools that we have to suppress, control, address the issues. It's kind of like, it's a bad example maybe, but we all hate cockroaches, okay? To say that we've given up and we just live with cockroaches is really not fair to the fact that we all are fighting it every day. It's just that they're winning right now. So to say that we gave up on the Big Island, I think we have to herald our Hawaii Island staff. They've been fighting this fight for so long. And it's with the resources and tools they have, they're still fighting. But Hawaii Island it's big. The ranchers, the farmers, they're fighting not only little fire ants, I've said this before, and it's very likely that every farm and ranch operation in the state has an infestation of some sort. And it's fighting all of that together all the time, everywhere, every day is the tough thing. So we haven't given up. We're managing. We're doing as best as we can with the resources we have.
Okay, I can appreciate that. I have some questions about your budget request, because in letters that you've sent back to us in August and October, and I realize we're running short on time, so I'll try and be fast. You did mention that to respond to the emergency, you were considering a reorganization, which would begin with the movement of those 46 inspectors from special funds to general funds. And the savings to the special fund would amount to, in your letter, you said 2.5, but you don't have your letter in front of you. I just checked it. It was about $2.9 million. And then there were some other positions that amounted to, I think, another 400,000. And then there was also, you mentioned for continued response to the CRB and LFA outbreaks, a request for $5 million more that would not be designated for specific pests, but that you could use as you needed in order to address research and things like biocontrol. Okay. Is that the reorganization plan?
It is the plan. I think a reorganization is bigger. The bigger reorg maybe is what we were thinking. Okay.
So because you noted in August that you intended to pursue the reorganization, and then in October you responded that you needed a total of about $8 million to respond. When can we see the breakouts of those expenditures and how those reflect a reorganization of your department to appropriately respond?
I don't know where the 8 million came from.
You asked for a $5 million allocation,
And then a 3 million.
and then the 3 million input,
Yeah.
right? Because
Thank you, I'm sorry.
you're asking us to use state general fund monies to start paying those inspectors, which is a reasonable request. That's going to free up the $3 million in the cargo fee monies on a year-over-year, an annual basis. What are you going to use the money for?
Well, right now it would be to provide the chemicals, overtime for our staff. I'm sorry, am I missing?
So you said that was necessary to facilitate your departmental reorganization. So what I'm asking for is some clarity on when you're going to provide us that reorganization plan and how the $8 million request in total is going to facilitate that and what the public is going to get out of it.
Okay. We're in the process now of working with the administration to see what part of that is going to get funded. And then once we know whether we can come out to you and let you know that.
Well, but in August, you told me you were working on it already.
We are.
Now, I understand that there's an emergency situation that's taking place on Maui, and it's going to deeply impact the budget. Right? But those are decisions that the legislature is going to take up in our session. What will make it difficult for us to take up is whether we will fund these requests if we don't have any details on what it is you intend to do with the money.
That's fair.
We can draft out or articulate out the phased implementation of the reorg, because this really is.
This is your reorg.
Right. The 3 million though was, it's bad to say this, but it's kind of like a replacement for the barrel tax that was taken in the last session. So we don't really have a definite what we're going to do with it because it was basically to supplement emergencies, things happen.
Chair, these are statements that you made in letters that you sent to the Hawaii State Senate. You said you were undertaking a reorganization to respond to the crisis, and we asked for details of that plan.
Okay, I'll stay with what the
Right.
deputy said.
So where you're moving around money is not a plan, right? And what you're doing with the money that you move around would be helpful in understanding what the plan is and what the objectives are.
One thing I would say is pesticides is a big thing and was a big thing last session. If some of those pesticides bills pass, the reorganization would involve splitting off the pesticides branch to its own division, like they do with the EPA. We would look at a reorg based on the reaction.
And so if you could show us a proposal, then we can take it into consideration rather than negotiating a reorganization at the table in an informational
Got it.
briefing. Right? I would like to just close really quickly because we're talking fundamentally about rules to take action against 5 bad actors. Just for the edification of the public that's watching, do we have any idea how many nurseries there are statewide?
So about 160, Jonathan?
Those are certified nurseries.
Okay.
So for plant quarantine, we regulate inter-island movement and then certification for export out of the state. And we work through a compliance agreement with specific nurseries to meet certain requirements so that they can self-certify export. Nurseries that do not.
Well, I guess just how many total statewide? Because I'm trying to get an understanding of what % of this industry
Chair, it's not,
are not complying.
it affects nurseries maybe more because of the mandatory inspection due to the way that they package their material, right? It's mandatory to inspect those, but things like fruits and veggies are not every fruit and vegetable case gets inspected. So while a couple hundred certified nurseries, I think the better number is the how many farmers?
7,328 farms. According to the 2017 census, we expect that number updated in April with the 2022.
And in terms of nurseries, there are at least 160 that are voluntarily complying with best management practices as established by your department. And they've signed an agreement that says they're following all the rules. And to the extent of the law, they probably can and should be trusted for consumers. But there are, at this point, you're recognizing there are at minimum 5 operators that are statewide and at least 1 that is in Waimanalo that is not complying, and that you are now taking action to empower yourself with the ability to do enforcement. Okay. Any other questions before we?
So was that along the lines of, I'm sorry, I jumped out for a second.
Sure.
You can't publish the bad actors, but could you make a list of the good ones?
The certified.
Yeah,
nursery
you are
is
certified fresh.
Are they listed on our
Pest-free.
That
website?
is on the department's website.
It's on our website.
So basically somebody could basically do deductions then. Okay, all right, thanks.
Just so that we can be clear, what is the certified nursery list and where can it be found? And what does it mean to be a certified nursery?
Do you mind explaining the program succinctly and then?
So yeah, so the program, they meet best management practices. We certify an area. We go twice a year to check for pest infestations, particularly nematodes, specific nematode species. But the certification is only granted if no pests are found. Yeah, they have specific building requirements, bench heights, pest management practices, all these sorts of things. So and we go twice.
And as a function of the voluntary compliance agreement, you can go on the property, you can look for pests.
That is correct.
Right.
So that's the way you have the consumers use the power of voting with their feet, so to speak, right?
That is correct. That's something that they can do.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for attending. Chair Gabbard, thank you for your willingness to be amenable to allowing House members to sit in the Senate outside of conference committee. Thank you all very much for participating, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone. We're adjourned.
Thanksgiving.